this is our Tesla coil. It was invented by inventor and scientist Nikola Tesla. It is an alternating current coil, and it was meant, or what he wanted to do with it, he wanted to put one in everyone's hometown, much larger than this, and it would send electricity wirelessly into your home for free. So this was not going to happen at that time because they couldn't do it safely and on the scale they needed. And it's also alternating current. So at the time, direct current by Thomas Edison was much more popular, but today we more use alternating currents in things like our cell phones and home devices. So the way we power this is we use a normal outlet like you have at home. It's 240 volts. It's like what you would use to power a washer or dryer. And we take that through this orange port here, and it goes into these white circles at the bottom. These are like batteries. They're called capacitors, and they hold that electricity and send it to this coil. This coil is over 2,000 feet of tightly coiled copper wire, and after that it goes into these lightning rods towards the top, where we are able to do our light show, and you'll be able to see the lights in a minute. So we make sound from this because when the electricity comes out, it displaces the air molecules, and when the air molecules fall back in, it makes noise. So the longer our electricity, the lower the sound will be, and the shorter, the higher pitched it will be.
Hello everybody, so my name is Keith. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a paleontologist, but all the information I'm going to be giving to you folks today comes from the paleontologists who work here at the Gray Fossil Site. This is the Gray Fossil Site. It was discovered about 23 years ago by the Tennessee Department of Transportation. It's like a road crew. They were out here doing road work and they started to notice some unusual things. You see, that road crew, after they removed a top layer of red clay, underneath they found rich, dark black soil, which is very unusual for this area, and that rich, dark black color was their first clue that this was someplace special. Well, the road crew kept digging, and then they hit, and I mean literally hit with heavy equipment, a long tusk. If this had been an Ice Age fossil site, they may not have preserved our fossil site. They may have just kept digging. They wouldn't have built this museum for you folks to visit, and people would just be driving over fossils with no idea. Thankfully, though, they did keep digging. And after that long tusk, one of the next important early discoveries they made was of an ancient alligator. Now, could that alligator live out here during the Ice Age? No. That alligator told us our fossil site had to date back to a warmer and more distant time period. Now we know our fossil site is about 5 million years old. So that's 60 million years too late to have dinosaurs. You don't find dinosaurs here. No, our fossil site is from right before the Ice Age, right before it got cold. We are in active dig pit. You can see them up in the corner. That's Ray and Laura. They're digging for fossils today. You can wave at them. The tarps are going to protect the parts of the pit that we're not actively digging in from the elements like the sun, heavy rains, and animals that live in this ecosystem today. Today we have cats and groundhogs, and they want to be paleontologists too. The tarps kind of keep them at a distance. Now raise your hand for me if you remember that long tusk we were talking about. Okay. Now, we said it can't be a dinosaur, and we know it wasn't a woolly mammoth. Any other guesses for what it might have been? I heard mastodon. Do we all agree with that? Yeah? Yeah? So mastodon, that's what it was. It was an ancient extinct elephant. Now mastodons looked a lot like elephants today. They were very large. They had long noses and long tusks. But the mastodons we find here were bigger and heavier than woolly mammoths and modern day elephants. And we pulled out about 70%, almost a whole mastodon from this pit over here. Now if you follow that black tarp, its hind legs were at the back of the pit, and its 13-foot long tusks came all the way out to the other side closest to us. People ask us all the time, how did your animals end up here? Well, you remember that watering hole I mentioned before. Now that watering hole was very important. It attracted many different animals here over thousands and thousands of years. That means our animals didn't all die here in the same way or at the exact same time. In the mastodon's case, you folks might notice that that pit is pretty bumpy. Well, a lot of those bumps are actually boulders, and there were more boulders on top of the mastodon. So one of their hypotheses, one of their educated guesses, is that perhaps the mastodon died in a rock slide. And actually, these rocks right here next to us, some of these rocks were the ones on top of the mastodon. That means those rocks may have killed a mastodon 5 million years ago.
Another large animal that we find here are rhinos. When you guys think of a rhino, you probably think of an animal with a great big horn on its nose. But the rhinos that we find here never had any kind of horn. Instead of the horn, it had two short tusks that came out the bottom of its chin that moved up to meet flat teeth up top. So every time the rhino opened or closed its mouth, its teeth and its tusks touched. It sharpened its tusks that way to defend itself. We found 7 rhinos so far, but of those 7, 3 of them were nearly complete. One of the rhinos was found at the edge of the mastodon pit right over here. And the other 2 were found right over here where this shelter is.
So, as the paleontologists are digging up large fossils from elephants, rhinos, giant camels, if those fossils are intact, if they're together, they're pretty hard to miss. But as they dig around larger fossils, they might miss fossils from smaller animals, like snakes, turtles, birds. The smallest thing we find here is actually fossilized pollen, this teeny tiny. So how do we find such small things? Well, as we dig, we save all that sediment, all that fossil dirt, and we put it into these yellow bags. We write the location where the bags were dug up, and then we pour those bags into these boxes here. Those are just milk crates that we've added fine wire mesh and pool noodles to. We're going to take those boxes filled with fossil dirt into tubs of water. And just like panning for gold, That's how we're going to find more of those tiny micro fossils. Now, I started here back in 2019, and back then they told me they went through 1,000 of these yellow bags. 999 bags out of 1,000 had some kind of animal fossil. At the rate that we're digging, they think it's going to take 16,000 years to dig up all the fossils on the 5 acres of land here.
So this is our prep lab. When we get a fossil, we bring it in here in either the kind of Ziploc bags or in the field jackets. That large piece right there, that is mainly white, that is the upper jawbone of our mastodon. Its teeth are touching the table. So that white stuff is called butte bar. That is a glue made by Eastman Chemical Company in Kingsport. It can be dissolved with acetone, so if we do make a mistake, we can take it off. But it's not really common to make a mistake. We do not put anything back together unless it 100% fits like a jigsaw puzzle and completely flat. So in this slab, this is where they clean with alcohol and swabs. And then they put these pieces back together, as well as they categorize them so we know what they are. We also have a picking station, which is mainly volunteers right now. They sit under microscopes and they go through smaller fossils like vertebrae and frogs. So we have those, and we also have a lot of volunteers in there. But during the summer, it's mainly students in paleontology at ETSU. So that's mainly who you'll see in there with some of our paleontologists that work here full time. Okay. Any questions? Okay. If not, I will take your passes, and you are free to continue exploring the museum.